The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Saturdays or Sundays, SOR Media, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the expressed written consent of SOR Media is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced? Then come own the night with us.
Little brother has taken control, shoveling dirt in every hole. Predators to condemn your soul, watching you and watching me. We're all
stationed atop the mountains of British Columbia, live from SOR headquarters. This is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
We live behind glass curtains and act like nothing's wrong. Soon you will belong.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, and on Spaced Out Radio on iTunes. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Instagram at Dave Scott SOR, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio.
Brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye with the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
I know you're out there somewhere. We've watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We'll expose you all. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Little brother wants to make headlines, be immortalized.
It's Wednesday, January 10th, Thursday, January 11th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. And this is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, and it's great to have you along for the ride. I hope you had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North on top of the mountains that are quite snowy still indeed, here in central British Columbia, broadcasting live from SOR headquarters. We say hi, how are you to everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on SpacedOutRadio.com, Spreaker, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio to Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. We're all over social media. Find us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, follow me at Dave Scott SOR. Head over and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, we have a GoFundMe account going on right now. We're fundraising to build a brand new studio here at SOR headquarters. GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. That's GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. Want to give a big thanks to Keith in the Spreaker chat room for donating today. Really appreciate you taking the time and the effort. Thank you so much for believing in the cause. Now, If you head to our website, $5 a month, you can become an SOR Space Travelers member. You can shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Read up on the encounter online, dealing with everything paranormal, strange, and odd. You can also check out my latest blog there as well. We got great videos from Tim Doyle's UFO Seekers and Leslie Mitchell Clark's Contact TV. What makes a man or a woman a killer? What makes a child become a killer? What makes someone take another person's life? What about multiple murders? Serial killers. What goes wrong in someone's body or brain to cause them to kill? Is it a bloodlust of power and control? For millennia, we have seen sick individuals, sometimes with brilliant IQs, who use their smarts to commit the most heinous of crimes. From Ted Bundy to Jeffrey Dahmer, Jim Jones, all the way back to Stalin, Hitler, even Genghis Khan. What makes these people feel that another person's life is just so worthless? One of the most famous cold cases in the United States belongs to the Zodiac Killer. And we are going to get into all of these topics tonight with researcher and author Soren Korsgaard, calling all the way over from Denmark. His intrigue into the science of serial killers has deemed some very interesting results, and for the next 2 hours, he will be discussing his findings right here on SOR. You know, Soren, we tried last month to get you on the show. However, Skype just wasn't working for us. Tonight, we got it happening. How are you, and welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for the introduction. I'm so happy to be on now, and everything is really working well, and I can hear you perfectly.
We're glad that you're here as well. Now, Soren, you're a pretty young guy. What made you find such fascination in serial killers and the science behind it?
Well, it started really early in my life, actually. I was kind of interested in mysteries. Some of the topics that you raised on your radio program. And later on, I became interested in serial killers, in particular unsolved crime cases, unsolved serial repetitive type of cases. And later on, this interest was converted into a focus on forensic psychology and understanding evil, brutality of the darkest corners of humanity. And then I started looking into that. What do we know about it? Can we understand evil? And of course, we should define evil in this particular instance. Everybody can relate to violence committed out of self-defense, for instance. But when it's interesting is when there is no obvious rationale. When everybody is perplexed, like in the case of Ted Bundy, for instance. He appeared to be well-mannered, well-educated, and so forth, but surprised everyone when it was revealed that he was a brutal serial killer.
Soren, I'm going to get you to speak a little bit clearer towards your microphone on your phone here, because you're sounding very muffled on this end, and we're getting about every third word. We're getting the full sentences, but it sounds really muffled, if you understand what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. Okay. How about now?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you so much. So what made you, as you started to research this, what made you focus a lot on American serial killers? Because, let's face it, there's a number of them in Europe as well. But the popularity outside of Jack the Ripper really seems to be with United States serial killers.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's most of the interesting cases originally in the United States. And I became particularly interested in the Zodiac case because that's truly a unique case. And it's unique for a variety of reasons. One of them is that his letters and phone calls provide us with an insight into the mind of a psychopath on the loose that's not interviewed from prison, Clearly, as most people recognize, psychopaths are highly manipulative and self-serving. And when you interview them in prison or from some other kind of captivity, then you're probably not going to get much truth out of them. But the Zodiac case is truly unique since you have multiple letters and phone calls from the serial killer written freely from him. He was never caught, never even identified, and we'll probably never know who he was. I think he's probably dead today, but yeah.
So when you started researching, and we're going to talk about the Zodiac Killer a little bit later on in the show, but when you started researching, what were you able to find out about why, Soren, people like to kill other people?
Well, there are many theories, and when you study serial killers, then one of the most widely accepted theories is the environmental or social hypothesis, which basically point to instances in the offender's childhood and sort of uses that as a rationale to explain their behavior. For instance, people contend that the childhood of Ted Bundy was absolutely horrible and that eventually led him to kill people. And people have alleged that the childhood of John Wayne Gacy was horrible as well. He was apparently strictly abused and, by his dad and so forth. And Edmund Kemper, the tall, high IQ killer also from the USA, who murdered his mom and several others. He himself indicated that it was his childhood that made him kill. But again, this theory feels there are some instances where you can look at an offender's past and say that that definitely contributed or helped shape or mold his actions. But it doesn't explain everything. And I think the Jeffrey Dahmer case is an excellent example. For example, he murdered at least 17 young men and cannibalized them. And however, he also had a brother that grew up under very similar circumstances. And he never committed any crimes or anything, and was, by all accounts, very well-adjusted and so forth. So clearly, the social hypothesis is not sufficient to describe cruelty and evil. There has to be something more to it than just that.
I'm going to get you to shift your phone again because you're getting a little bit more muffled again, and it is tough to hear. But we're going to continue on here. Did you notice that when you did your studies into serial killers or people who murder in general, was it always about violence in the home, being beaten up by parents, especially the father, who wasn't really a father figure, or was it because mostly of bullying, maybe at school, or something along those lines, or a big combination of both?
Well, I think that when you really look at the cases, most of the information, they're original from the serial killers. For instance, Ted Bundy, he specifically stated in his last interview that pornography made him kill. And he was apparently exposed to violent pornography in his childhood and so forth. But it has been revealed later on that he, in all probability, concocted that story just to paint a favorable picture of himself as an innocent child who was exposed to pornography, and that made him a murderer. And other than that, he was just a regular person. But again, as indicated earlier, when you interview serial killers, when they are captured, they will try to they'll tell you what you want to hear because that's their nature. So again, the social theory is simply not enough. And again, many researchers then point to the fact that, well, the reason why you might have several children growing up under similar circumstances and only one of them becomes a cold-blooded killer, that's due to psychopathy. They're psychopaths. Of course, that's now an older term. Now it's called the antisocial personality disorder. I think most people have a pretty good conception of what characterizes a psychopath. But a psychopath is a severe personality disorder. And the main features of a psychopath are lack of conscience, manipulation, narcissism, grandiosity, a disregard for rules and regulations. And you determine whether or not a person has this personality disorder basically via interviews and a questionnaire, a simple test. You don't have any physical or genetic tests or anything, so the actual diagnosis is highly subjective. And of course, psychiatry has been ruthlessly criticized over the years as being extremely unreliable. For instance, if you go to a psychiatrist and highlight certain symptoms, it's going to give you a final diagnosis. But if you highlight the same symptoms to a different psychiatrist, it'll probably give you a different diagnosis than the first one. So psychiatry has its limitations, and new diagnoses are constantly added and some are removed. For instance, years ago, homosexuality was considered to be a diagnosis in the DSM, which is used in the United States to categorize personality disorders, mood disorders, and so forth. In Europe, they mostly use the ICD, the International Classification of Diseases. In regards to psychopathy, there's also the psychopathy checklist, which is also used. Psychopathy is used to explain why some people become murderers and others don't, even though they grew up under the same circumstances. However, what caused them to become psychopaths? And we don't know that. We don't know why some people become a psychopath. And not a lot of research is done into this area for several reasons. It is generally agreed upon that there is no known treatment. You cannot treat a psychopath. There is no known medication. Psychotherapy won't do them any good. Typically, when psychopaths are incarcerated, they typically become model prisoners, like Ted Bundy, for instance, and Dr. Michael Swango, for instance, and many others, and they behave very, very well. However, as soon as they are released, they get back onto the same pattern and start killing again. That's what we see over and over again. So the personality disorder hypothesis is also one that's frequently highlighted.
We are still having a little bit of trouble with the the sound on your end, Soren, and we are getting what you were saying, but it's coming through once again a little bit muffled. I don't know if you can maybe adjust where you're sitting or something, because at the beginning you start very, very clear, and then you kind of fade off into the mumbling. I know it's early for you. It's just after 6 a.m. your time, and we appreciate you doing this. How many of these serial killers that you investigated had high IQs? Because we hear from a lot of documentaries and a lot of studies that have been done on serial killers that many of them actually are brilliant men, and if they would have used their brains for something good, or had the opportunity to use their brains something good, their lives could have been so much different.
Well, if we accept the premise that IQ tests actually reveal intelligence, there's a lot of controversy to that, what it actually shows. But there are definitely serial killers with high IQs out there. Ted Bundy, Ted Kaczynski, for instance, who was a Harvard professor of mathematics, educated at Harvard, and Edmund Kemper apparently scored in the high 130s on his IQ test. And based on his interviews, he's clearly intelligent. And of course, the Zodiac Killer revealed a lot of characteristics during his crimes and letters, which suggest that he was highly intelligent as well. For instance, the Zodiac Killer created cryptograms or ciphers, codes, some of which haven't been solved to this day. And his crimes were very sophisticated, very organized, and that typically indicates somebody who is of average or high intelligence. So it is indeed puzzling why some intelligent persons become madmen, serial killers, because you tend to think that they will be able to reason themselves out of their irrationality. But clearly that's not the case. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Better now?
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate that on behalf of our audience. So with these killers, like you said, Kaczynski, Bundy, very brilliant type men, they always have to be using their brains to stay 1 to 5 steps ahead of the police, and maybe in the case of the Zodiac Killer, maybe 20 to 30 steps ahead of the police at every time. Do you think this, for a lot of them, does show a higher sense of intelligence in what they are doing?
Well, can you rephrase that question, please? I'm not sure I understood it.
Well, you mentioned Ted Bundy, you mentioned Kaczynski, all right, very smart individuals, with education. The Zodiac Killer you could include in that as well, because a lot of killers always have to be, for the most part, using their brain so they can continue to kill without getting arrested by police. And do you think this maybe associates a higher intelligence in a lot of these killers because their brain has to be constantly moving to evade police?
Well, yeah, in a certain sense. However, there are many instances of low IQ serial killers evading the authorities for many years. Simply because of the nature of life and so forth, they weren't apprehended. For instance, Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, he killed for many years and at least 48 women. Some researchers put that figure much higher, 70 plus or even higher than that. And he apparently tested he received a score of about 80 on his IQ test. So clearly he wasn't very intelligent, but he was actually pretty efficient in evading the police, putting out false clues, confusing the investigators and the profilers. So maybe he just had a bad day the day he was taking the IQ test. Who knows? But what's killing in the case of Ted Bundy and the Zodiac and many of the others, the intelligence contributed to the crimes, to the prolonged crime spree, to the ability to evade capture for a long time. For instance, Ted Bundy, he studied how the police work, studied their methods, methodology, and many other things, and that eventually helped shape his crime spree. For instance, he committed many of the murders far away from his search space, which is quite unusual. But Ted Bundy knew that most murders are committed close to one's home. So he started experimenting about driving far away from where he actually lived and then committed his killings, because he also knew that police were unlikely to link together the crimes if they were committed at a significant distance of each other.
Are most serial killers introverted personalities or extroverted personalities?
That's a good question. Well, I would say most of them are introverted. They kind of get caught up with their fantasy world. Many serial killers are driven by fantasies, different type of fantasies. You could probably pen a whole book categorize the different fantasies. Ted Bundy was a sexually sadistic type of serial killer, and he was clearly driven by sexual fantasies. The Zodiac Killer was clearly not a sexual type of serial killer. There were no sexual signature to any of his crimes, but it was clearly driven by fantasies to a certain extent. For instance, in September 1969, he created a costume for himself that he wore during one of his crimes. The costume made him look like an executioner type of serial killers, and he had prepared all kinds of things that he brought along to the actual crime scenes, like 3/4 length of clothesline, and concocted a ruse about being an escaped prisoner. And to get the victims into a favorable position so he could stab them, even though he had a gun already. So he clearly had a picture in his mind about how he wanted things to proceed, and he wanted to kill them in a certain way. Also, he called the cops shortly after the crime, confessing to the murder. So clearly, fantasy were also a part of his motivation, and so yeah, they are presumably mostly introverted persons, and driven by fantasies. I think we can basically conclude that. Yes.
With those introverted personalities that they have, were a lot of these gentlemen, if we focus on male serial killers here for a second, were they mama's boys? Were they anti-women? Were they heartbroken at a young age or teased because of shrinkage coming out of a cold lake or swimming pool? What happened with a lot of these guys to turn them into women haters the way they are? Because for most serial killers, their targets have been women.
Yes. Well, I don't accept the hypothesis that you can explain their behavior just simply by looking at their past. I believe many people can relate to not having an ideal childhood and not at all feeling compelled to act out violent impulses. But I think their childhood is shapes most the crimes to a certain extent. For instance, if you study the victims of Ted Bundy, they were all very, very similar, and it has been observed that his victims were very similar to his former fiancée that rejected him. So kind of killed her over and over again. But again, the alleged abuse of many of them is very varied. Many different scenarios, and of course, some serial killers are also mentally ill. They are psychotic. There are instances of that as well. But the cases that I found really interesting are those cases where there is no what you could call an acceptable rationale for their behavior.
So with the serial killers, why are most of them men? Why do so few women go this psychopathic?
That's a very interesting question, and I don't think there's any research which illuminate why there are more male serial killers than female. Maybe the women are more careful and are apprehensive. That's why we don't hear about them. Well, one of the other hypotheses which has been proposed in recent times is that psychopathy is the result of a brain abnormality. One study that looked at criminal psychopaths found that it could be associated with a decreased connectivity between the amygdala and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. In other words, a brain deficiency might actually be the cause of the disorder of psychopathy. But again, there are also false positives, and also the study only looked at incarcerated psychopaths. How about the most successful psychopaths, those that wear a suit, politicians, for instance, mass murderers, politicians that kill, that commit war crimes, and so forth. But they show the same deficiencies. Can they accurately be classified as psychopaths based on the DSM, the characteristics outlined in the DSM, the ICD, and the psychopathy checklist? How do the political mass murders, and how about military men that cold-blooded military murderers? How about them? Do they show the same characteristics and so forth? So there are many unanswered questions, and a lot of controversy in this area of the world. We're probably never going to see a study focusing on political mass murders and military men. That would be just too controversial. Instead, what they typically do is that they look at incarcerated serial killers, and then they kind of extrapolate that information onto everybody else.
Kathleen Warnos is one of the women Kathleen Warnos was one of the, I believe one of the first women in the United States to be convicted and sent to the death penalty, and died via the death penalty regarding her mass murder spree. You could just see it in her eyes in television interviews that there was, we hear about, soldiers having that 100-yard stare. She seemed to have that 100-yard stare and that bloodlust that a lot of serial killers have. In fact, that's exactly what she was. Do you think because women carry their emotions different than men for the most part, where a woman's anger usually doesn't turn to violence like a men's anger does, that has any role with it? And what do you think would cause a woman to snap so badly to go on a murderous tear like that?
Well, sure, you could argue the case that due to testosterone and other factors, men are more likely to act out violent impulses. Surely that's a viable hypothesis. And Kathleen Warner's, or how her name is pronounced, when you look at her interviews, in particular the interviews that were conducted close to her execution, she doesn't appear to be mentally fit. Well, I guess I don't think anybody would be if they knew they were going to be executed, but she definitely appear mentally unstable in the sense that she appears to be psychotic. She doesn't really appear to be in touch with reality. So that might also have been a factor that contributed to her crimes. And there were also a lot of abuse, alcoholism, possible drug abuse, and also sexual abuse in the childhood. So there were probably many factors involved. And I think that if we want to explain evil, we have to look at many different factors. It's not just one thing you can point to. It's not just a brain of analysis, but there are many factors involved here.
I'm going to get you to back away from your microphone just a tad again, if you don't mind, my friend. Thank you.
All right.
Do you think that the courts justify murderous women differently than they do murderous men?
Well, that's a good question. You would have, well, assume you imply the United States. I don't think they do. No, I think they're punished pretty much in the same manner. But there are cases of actual serial killers being released, but mostly in Europe and in a few other places. Germany has released a few serial killers throughout the years, and they apparently didn't kill again after they were released. At least we don't know about it, so that's kind of interesting as well. But at least the United States doesn't have a reputation for releasing serial killers once they are actually caught, no matter how well behaved they are. For instance, David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, he committed crimes that are very similar to those of the Zodiac Killer. And when he was finally caught in the late 1970s, he became a model prisoner and openly communicated with mental health professionals and so forth. Apparently became very, very religious, and but there's no indication that he would ever be released, even though he's very well adjusted in prison and so forth, and he gives the pretension that is ready and fit for society. But in all probability, he is not that. The murder.
The mind of a serial killer is quite intriguing. Is a lot of what they do built off of chemical imbalance or a lack of prescription drugs to, clarify their thoughts and their intentions?
No, I don't think you can treat it with chemicals. At least psychiatry isn't very successful when you look at depression, anxiety disorders, schizophrenia, and so forth. It isn't very successful at all, and often you'll have very, very significant side effects and very little positive results. Many books have shown that over the years, and studies, of course. So the overall question is it possible to stop a serial killer before he becomes one? Clearly, when you look at other types of cases like gang-related assault, gang-related murder, in those cases, you will be able to re-socialize that person and change his path and behavior and so forth. But I think in the case of serial killers, it's going to be very, very difficult. There are cases of serial killers being released and actually achieving quite a great deal of success in various ways, but still they couldn't stop killing. There's something which drives them to kill, and they just can't stop. Yeah, like machines, very often.
Is there a difference in the focus of the mind between a serial killer and a mass murderer like the Las Vegas shooter who took out, who shot over 515 people, which included over 58 dead?
Clearly, yes. There's a great difference between the two. The mass murderer isn't worried about being caught. He just wants to take out as many people as he possibly can, and the crime sprees are typically acted out within a few minutes. Like the Columbine shooters, they killed as many people as they could, and then they shot themselves. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. So clearly, it's like a rage, empowering rage that they cannot control. And the serial killer is different in that he does not want to be caught. Very rarely a serial killer wants to be caught, but there are actually instances of serial killers calling the police and turning themselves in, like Edmund Kemper. He called the cops, and he just didn't want to go on any longer. Maybe it was due to his intelligence that he realized that he just couldn't continue killing people, so he would rather be in prison. So he called the cops, and they picked him up, and he's been in prison ever since. But the mass murderer is clearly different. One of the common characteristics among mass murderers is the use of psychotropic drugs like antidepressants and mood disorder prescription type of drugs. When you look at the actual side effects of these drugs, one of them is possible violent fantasies, impulses, and also suicide. Suicide is actually a possible side effect of an antidepressant, and that's one of the common denominators among mass murderers. That is prescription drugs, and you don't really see that that much among serial killers.
Goddess Michelle has a question at #SpacedOutRadio on Twitter. There are a lot of people who believe that there is almost like a particle called the killer gene. Do you know, or have you looked into this? From what she has seen, they will be able to find these people before puberty in the future, then they can monitor them closer. Have you looked into that?
Well, not that much, no. But again, what's interesting is that in the studies, they will be looking at the defeated psychopaths, those you will find in prison. You won't be looking at political mass murderers, who are often much more deadly. Too numerous to mention: Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin. You could even argue George Bush, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War. one study puts the death toll of the Iraq war to 1.5 million, and there's been argued over and over again that that war was committed, that the Americans were led to that war under false pretenses. You might read the book, The Prosecution of George W. Bush for Murder by Vincent Bugliosi. If you identify this gene, will you find that in George Bush? Will you find that in other political mass murders? And how about military men? For instance, let's take Chris Kyle, the American sniper. He killed 300 people during these wars as a sniper, and he never expressed any remorse for any of the killings. In fact, in one of his interviews, he said, "I guess we're ready to kill some more people." Will his analysis show some kind of killer gene? What will it show? I suspect it won't. I think it's much more complex than just finding a killer gene. For instance, in regards to military men committing murders, I think we have to look at the Milgram experiment. Stanley Milgram was a psychologist, and in 1969 he conducted a scientific study, which became known as the Milgram experiment, and he demonstrated that ordinary citizens would administer sadistic electrical torture, even resulting in death, is that if they exempt from punishment, and most importantly, and this was shown to be the critical factor, if they are commanded to do so from an authority figure. The death and torture were simulated, of course, but the participants didn't know this. This is a famous study where you put a person into a room. You hear the door, but you can still hear them, and you bring in the person of interest, and this person will then administer electrical shock to the person in the other room. If the person inside the room doesn't answer certain questions correctly. And most people that have familiar with this experiment to some degree. And this study was done several times in many different countries, including in Denmark, where I'm located, and in Germany as well. In the first study, they found that a staggering 65% were willing to inflict a fatal dose of volt. And in some studies, that number was over 90%. But the average percentage was 60% in US and abroad. But it was also shown that people would not administer this simulated dose of volt if the person commanding to do so wasn't an authority figure. So that was a critical factor. How about these people? Well, they also show a killer gene, because clearly they have demonstrated the capacity to kill if they're just commanded to do so from an authority figure. So that's an extremely controversial area.
Another question coming all the way from Australia from Tanya. Hi, Tanya. Hope you're having a good afternoon. How's tomorrow looking? Make sure you tell us at #SpacedOutRadio. She is asking, why do serial killers leave a calling card when apparently they don't want to be caught?
Why do they leave a calling card? Well, many serial killers like attention. For instance, you could argue the calling card of the Zodiac versus his letters, his phone calls. He didn't want to be caught, yet he couldn't resist the impulse to draw attention to himself. That's why he also created cryptograms. In one letter that he wrote, he stated, quote, "My name is," and then a string of 13 symbols and letters that supposedly contained his name. It hasn't been solved to this day. So clearly he'll love the attention. But by calling cards, she might also be referring to a criminal signature. The signature is an unconscious aspect that happens during the actual crime. For instance, you might have a serial killer that ties certain knots when they strangle their victim, and they might not, and that might help investigators tie together the actual crime, and it is presumably a part of their fantasies, but they aren't really conscious of this actual aspect. So, but again, that's a very interesting aspect of serial killers, the signature aspect.
And apparently tomorrow, according to Tanya, is going to be hot, 35 degrees Celsius. It's about 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, I had a high of minus 18 Celsius today. It got cold here today, not going to lie. But it was a good cold. Let's go back to Twitter for another question from Andrew, who is asking, is narcissism linked to psychopathy? If so, when does a self-centered personality cross into a complete lack of empathy when a person's moral compass is gone?
Well, psychopathy and narcissism are two different personality disorders. However, narcissism is a part of a psychopath's emotional makeup. Psychopaths are extremely narcissistic, self-centered, and grandiose. However, a what you could say a pure narcissistic individual might actually feel empathy and sympathy for another person, while the psychopath does not. The psychopath is extremely destructive. The narcissist might not be. And also, it's important to realize that many psychopaths are not murderers and do not commit crimes, but some do. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Absolutely it does. We have about 3 minutes here before we're going to hop out for our first break of the night. When you look at these serial killers, and if this answer gets a little bit longer, we can take it into the next hour as well, what kind of patterns did you see between the different serial killers you studied? Were there any similarities?
One of the similarities, you could argue, is that most of them are driven by power. They feel like God when they kill. They get to decide who should live, who should die. And this control, this power, which drives them to kill again and again, such as the American doctor Michael Swango, who murdered perhaps 60 of his patients in the U.S. and Africa. And it was the power to control life and death that drove him to kill again and again. And you could argue that the narcissistic aspect of his personality was significantly pronounced. This grandiosity you'll find among most, if not all, serial killers. They feel like God. Yes. Of course, you could then argue, well, maybe they feel powerless, and that's why they have to feel this sensation of power. You could argue that case as well, and the researchers do that.
So do you think then, with those similarities, that it could run, as we talked earlier, between men and women as well? Could they think along the same lines, along those similarities?
Oh, yes, definitely. The actual details of the crime spree might vary. However, the power component will almost always be present. For instance, when you have sexual homicides, the offender will often claim that, well, it wasn't actually because of sex, it was because of the power. I was able to control the person. So you will have a lot of different cases, and you'll have a lot, and there will be a lot of variations between them, but the power aspect will be present among women and male serial killers.
I'm going to get you to hold on right there, if you don't mind, as we are going to hop out for our first break of the night. Our guest tonight on SOR is Soren Korsgaard. We're talking serial killers. We're going to get into this Zodiac Killer in hour number 2 right after this, so stick around. In hour number 3, we're going to be joined by the preacher, our resident scientist on Spaced Out Radio, Eric Markham, to talk more about serial killers. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I'm your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
Hey, space travelers, it's Joe Roop, your host of Spaced Out Saturdays. Come join me as we explore the realms of the paranormal, the esoteric, and everything in between every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. You know the truth is out there. Don't get caught sleepwalking. Come join Spaced Out Saturdays. That's every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, right here on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at SpacedOutRadio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at SpacedOutRadio.com.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At SpaceOutRadio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to SpaceOutRadio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our Advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Do you want to know what's really going on in your world? Do you have questions about who you can trust in the mainstream media? Then look no further than the Rebel Planet. Come get the straight answers right here at spacedoutradio.com. Join me, Jamie Sexton, creator of Rebel Planet News, as I fill you in on the stories behind the stories. All you truth seekers, be sure to tune in to Rebel Planet on spacedoutradio.com the third Thursday of every month.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, John B. Alexander is going to join us. He worked for Robert Bigelow at the Skinwalker Ranch. We're going to find out if the stories are true there, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live on The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club to Chistoscope. Tachistoscope is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you could do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. We also have a live chat going on Facebook, the SOR Space Travelers group. You could sign up for that for free. We're on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Space Out Radio is the ending. So you just go youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. It'll take you right there, nice and simple. And our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Rock out to some Bumblefoot. Shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. You can also read The Encounter online, dealing with everything strange, paranormal, and odd. Watch UFO Seekers and Contact TV videos. And if you go to GoFundMe.com, that's GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. Be like Keith. Donate to help us build a brand new studio right here at SOR headquarters. We have terrestrial stations starting to line up. We got to get things rolling by the end of the month. So we really, really encourage you to either share the post from GoFundMe, or if you have the ability to donate, we would highly appreciate that as well. Tonight, for one more hour, we are talking with author Soren Korsgaard out of Denmark. We are talking about serial killers, and in this hour, we are going to be focusing on the Zodiac Killer. Now, of course, the Zodiac Killer is a man that has never been caught. There are many suspects. In fact, over 600 people have identified themselves as the Zodiac Killer. None of them have been proven to be the actual criminal behind these heinous murders that happened in the late 60s, early 1970s in the San Francisco Bay Area. Soren, welcome back to Spaced Out Radio.
Thank you.
What makes the Zodiac Killer case so special, if we can call it special?
The Zodiac Killer is special for several reasons, because of the unique aspects of the case. For instance, it's rare to find serial killers corresponding with the press, giving clues to their identity, creating cryptograms. And some of them haven't been solved today and might reveal pertinent information as to his identity. We don't know that. There are many unknowns. When was his first murder? We don't know that either, but we know that as the Zodiac, his first murder started was on December 20, 1968. But he may have committed other murders before that, but he kept those as secrets. Possibly, again, we don't know. Also, the case is really interesting because unlike the Jack the Ripper case, there is a lot of evidence to work with in the Zodiac case. You have his handwriting. You have witnesses' descriptions. You have composite drawings. You have fingerprints with traces of blood. We have knowledge of his weapon. We have knowledge of the car he drove. We know about the shoes he wore as well. In December 1969, his shoe prints suggested that he was a military man. It was a military type shoe. So there's a lot of evidence to work with, and also a partial DNA profile has been extracted from some of the evidence a few years ago. So if one day we actually find him a good suspect, then we will know whether or not that person is the Zodiac. So when you see sensational headlines, which I find quite often, new suspects, Zodiac has been identified, what have you, unless there's some hard evidence showing that, then it's most likely just sensationalism. There are many instances of this, and in my opinion, when you look at the case and the evidence, the evidence is strong, then the Zodiac has never been identified. There was never a suspect who was able to elude capture because of his intelligence, his organization, his ability to plan and predict. And that really makes the case really fascinating, because in the Jack the Ripper case, you might actually know the name of the Jack the Ripper, but you never know for certain, because there isn't a lot of evidence to work with. You don't have fingerprints or DNA or anything like that, at least not the credible sources of DNA. So that's really some of the things that make the case interesting. And also, the Zodiac Killer could be alive today. He could be. But he would be probably in his late 70s.
Do you think that the Zodiac Killer is still alive?
I think there's a reasonable high probability that he's still alive. A few years ago, I wrote an article where I calculated using basic statistical and probability theory that there was, I think it was a 60+% chance that he was alive as of 2009, using mortality tables and statistics and so forth. So, however, considering that he has not corresponded with the media for many years, it is likely that he's dead. He certainly wasn't apprehended for some other unrelated crime, because then we would know, because his fingerprints and characteristics and so forth. Maybe he died of old age. Maybe he killed himself. But certainly there are indications which suggest a self-destructive nature in his letters. So he may have committed suicide. We don't know. And also, the Zodiac Killer is very unique. It was believed for many years that serial killers cannot stop killing, but Zodiac Killer clearly disproved that hypothesis, since he in all probability didn't commit any more murders after October 1969, when he killed Paul Lee Stein in Presidio Heights in San Francisco. So he was able to control himself. He had that much self-control and discipline. He definitely fantasized and wanted to kill again, but was very, very close to being caught on that October night in 1969. But in all probability, he didn't kill again. So that's also what makes the case quite interesting. We know that Zodiac communicated in 1974, but there is a very high likelihood that he also penned that he sent a postcard, a secret postcard in 1990 to the San Francisco Chronicle. The handwriting on the envelope matches the Zodiac's handwriting in almost all of its aspects, and I believe that to be an authentic Zodiac communique in 1990. Of course, that's quite a long time ago, but again, it's much more recent than 1974.
Do you think when he wrote that letter to the newspaper in 1990 that it was just kind of a quiet, hello, I'm still here, you haven't found me yet? Was that what it was about, or do you think he was still maybe planning or plotting another murder because he had been silent for so long?
Well, around that time, there was a Zodiac copycat killer operating in, I think it was New York or that area. And he was kind of saying, I am still here, and you haven't caught me yet. He did. That's what the Zodiac sent in 1999. It was a secret THAL card. It was a reading, very similar to ones he had sent in 1970. And it was a very taunting card. And he was clearly saying, "I am here, and you're never going to catch me." And that's also opens up another interesting aspect, is that the Zodiac Killer case has inspired many other killers to adopt his modus operandi and actually copycat his crimes. And the 1990 copycat killer is just one example. There are several others as well.
The ciphers that he sent during his murderous spree, many still have not been decoded. Do you believe that he was well calculating this for years before he started his killing spree, so that way in his own mind he could perfect his anonymity?
Well, the first cipher he sent in July 1969. That was decoded pretty quickly by Donald Hardin and his wife, and the FBI as well, independently of each other. And that message that was revealed basically stated, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." And then he went on to say that killing is even more fun than actually having sex, and it's better than hunting animals, indicating he might actually be a hunter. Then he sent the notorious 340 cipher. It's called the 340 cipher because it contains 340 symbols and letters and numbers and a few other things. And that hasn't been solved to this day. And it probably contains an actual message. It might actually be a fake code, but according to the experts, it probably contains an actual message. And I think he made that cipher much more difficult than the first because he was disappointed that the first cipher was solved so rapidly. Later on, he constructed the "My Name Is" cipher, and that's really interesting because he actually told us his name, but unfortunately was within this cryptogram.
When you look at the codes, do they confuse you as a researcher in this subject? Have you been able to say, okay, I'm going to try and decode this cipher? Have you ever had any personal success in trying that? Or was it just so mathematically and artistically creative that it's damn well near impossible?
Well, it's definitely not impossible. Any cipher that has been created by man can be solved by man. And it is possible to solve the 340 cipher. I think if you want to solve one of the unsolved ciphers, you've got your best chance is solving the 340 cipher because because it's so long, so you can kind of verify it as you go along if your solution is accurate. Several individuals have actually claimed over the years to have actually solved that cipher, but clearly they didn't. In order to solve it, you're going to need a lot of luck. You're either going to use some really, really sophisticated computer software. That's a possibility. But if you're going to solve it by hand, you're going to need a lot of luck. You're going to have to study his letters, his tone of communication, his misspellings, his grammatical idiosyncrasies, and so forth. And you have to take all these things into considerations when you try to solve it. I have tried to solve the 340 cipher, but without success. I haven't spent that much time on it because it might take forever, and I don't have that much time. But what it contains, I don't know. It could be an important clue, and that's really what makes the case so fascinating. And I think on a related note from hour one, this power aspect is also revealed in his creating ciphers. For instance, he's able to control people's attention. He created these ciphers, and he knew that people would be all over them, the FBI, the NSA, the San Francisco Police Department, the public, because it was Zodiac was very keen on manipulating people through the press, and most of his letters were published on the front pages. including the 340 ciphers. So he was able to feel power just by creating these ciphers. And so Zodiac enjoyed power. That was truly one of his one of the key motivations revealed by his crime. For instance, after he stopped killing in October 1969, he kind of changed tactics because he had apparently decided not to kill again because he was just so close to being caught. So what he did instead was that he became a terrorist. He started threatening school children. He was going to blow up a bus using a bomb, and he kept the population in fear and was able to feel this power sensation by controlling the Bay Area. And he did that very, very successfully. After his initial threat was revealed, panic spread throughout San Francisco and elsewhere. And people really believed that he might actually try to take out a full school bus. Certainly you couldn't discount his threat because he had already at this point killed at least 5 people.
Do you think he never followed through with the bus bomb with children because maybe in the end, even though it's a very high-quality threat, children weren't really his goal? I mean, yes, he didn't care if he was killing men or women, so it wasn't a sexual thing, if we can call it that. But do you think he just did it as an idle threat just to see what the reaction from the police would be? Because he seemed to get off mentally on the fact that the police were running down suspicions on his every word. And that's a lot of power for a criminal to have.
Exactly, yeah. I don't think he ever intended to carry out the bus bomb threat. He did that for attention and for power. He loved attention. He wanted to be on the front page. And in his first letters in July, I think it's on July 31st, 69, he stated that if you don't print this cipher on the front page, I will go on a killing rampage. So he wanted the attention, and many times he re-emphasized this notion that he wanted to be on the front page, otherwise he'll start killing again. So clearly he loved attention. And then, of course, might argue the case that why is somebody craving attention to this exaggerated degree? Well, of course, he was a narcissist and he loved attention, but doesn't that also signify a lack of attention during his childhood? You might argue. I think probably.
Police had so many times felt they were close in trying to figure out who it was, but in the end, 30, 40 years later, they're no better off than where they were. Why do you think police have never been able to find whom the Zodiac Killer is? Because it is still an open case. This is one that, yes, it may be a little bit cold, but they've kept it open for a reason for this long.
Yes. Well, certainly he was organized. He was very well prepared, but he also made a lot of mistakes, such as leaving fingerprints. And as indicated in October, he was a few meters away from being apprehended, only due to a small error. He wasn't caught that night, so he was also lucky. But clearly, he was very skilled in what he did. And if he had been a more disorganized, perhaps less intelligent killer, he would probably have been caught. But he knew what he was doing. And the psychodynamics of the Zodiac Killer, his personality, what drives him is, of course, the subject that has interested a lot of people, and of course, is subject to much debate today. And if you go online, you find a lot of people discussing and theorizing about what kind of person was the Zodiac Killer. And that's something that I go through in the book as well in some detail. I created a portrait of his probable personality characteristics of the Zodiac. One of the things that I did when I was researching and writing this book was that I actually contacted several serial killers. One of the first one was Patrick Cheney, an American serial killer who murdered over 30 people back in the 60s. And I asked him if he wanted to help me create a profile of the Zodiac Killer. And he responded quite quickly, and he said that, well, I actually don't have any skills in criminal profiling, and if he assisted me, he would just get into more trouble. And then he said, but instead, I think you should contact Ian Brady. He will probably help you with your quest for knowing more about the Zodiac. Ian Brady, he recently passed away in Eastwood Hospital in England. He teamed up with Miles Finley in the 1960s and left behind a trail of death and destruction. Henry died in 2002, while Brady died in October 2017. So I sent Brady a letter a few years ago, and he responded quite quickly in his very first handwriting that I should read his book, The Gates of Genius, in which he discussed good and evil, and also analyzed the serial killers, including Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy, but not the Zodiac. And he went on to say that he had no interest in serial killers any longer. Now he was focusing his attention to political serial killers like Tony Blair, as he said. And of course, if any of the readers are interested in an actual serial killer, analyzing other serial killers, I would definitely recommend his book, The Gates of Genius, but then be aware of his manipulation. This is so frequent in the actual book. But it is indeed an interesting book. So as I was on this journey of understanding the Zodiac and serial killers, I also contacted Dr. Marcus Fongo, a notorious American doctor who killed many patients in U.S. and Africa. And we actually corresponded for several years, and we discussed the Zodiac case and many others. Swango, he was always cheerful and enthusiastic and eager to help me, all while I knew that I was corresponding with one of the most unpredictable and evil serial killers in history. He poisoned his patients. He poisoned his girlfriend until she committed suicide. He even poisoned his co-workers and just about everyone. And as I was corresponding with him, many of the symptoms associated with psychopathy revealed themselves during our correspondence. So very well, very slowly over time. Regarding the Zodiac, Dr. Swanger said that I should read Marcus Aurelius, a Greek emperor and Stoic philosopher, and I should understand on a basic level what the Zodiac was doing. And specifically, I should look at the Zodiac's first murder, as this would define him and provide a clear insight into his personality.
Stepping away from the Zodiac Killer for 1 second, I do have a question coming from the chat room asking whether or not there is a difference in mentality between serial killers from the United States and serial killers from where you are in your area of Denmark.
A difference in mentality? I don't think so. I think the same. I think the motivation is roughly the same. The personality personality structure, the possible deficiencies in the thinking and so forth are roughly the same. I don't think there's much of a difference there. I'm not sure that would apply to mass murders necessarily, but I think serial killers are pretty much the same when we look at their personalities and so forth. We don't have, in Denmark, we haven't had that many serial killers, but we have had a few over the years. Of course, quite a few in Germany, including Peter Curtin, the Düsseldorf vampire, one of the most notorious serial killers of all time. And from what he said and his actions, they're very similar to what you might find in the USA and so forth. So I would argue the case that there isn't much of a difference between them, except from the actual geographical location.
Getting back to the Zodiac Killer, do you believe that at any point the police in San Francisco were close to catching him?
No. Only in October 1969 when he was so close to being caught. Other than that, they were very far away from him, I believe. Because again, they investigated thousands of people, and if they actually caught him, investigated the actual Zodiac, they would know because of the evidence, because the evidence was so strong. So, in all probability, Zodiac was never a suspect, and was probably laughing at them.
What do you think the police were missing? Was it just not knowing who it is? Was it something in the ciphers, or was there something a little bit more that maybe we don't know about publicly?
Well, in order to, they actually had more evidence that you would have in your typical murder case: fingerprints, witnesses' descriptions, his handwriting. According to the experts, his handwriting wasn't a fake or altered. It was his natural handwriting. And it's really puzzling why nobody recognized his handwriting, because it was all over the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and so forth. How come did no one recognize his handwriting? And again, according to the experts, his handwriting wasn't fake. So that's just another mystery of the actual case. Maybe he wasn't an American. Maybe he was from Canada. Maybe he was from somewhere else, a military man stationed in the area. That's another possibility. It might explain some of these things.
What's your profile of him? Do you believe he was single? Do you believe he was a shy person? Do you believe he was eccentric? Do you believe he was, Caucasian, a 5'7" to 5'9" guy, or was he taller or shorter? What do you think his profile looks like to you?
Well, based on the surviving witnesses and the other eyewitnesses, he was clearly a fat individual. He was a stocky person, a beefy person. That's how he was described, an overweight person. So, and he may have used glasses occasionally. He had brown hair with a reddish tint, size 10.5 shoes. We know that for a fact. His voice was very even, consistent, monotonous. He was clearly familiar with Vallejo, where his first two crimes were committed as that we know of. He showed great familiarity with these areas. If I had to speculate, I would say that he most likely was most likely a military man. There are many indications of this. For instance, codes, cryptography is something that you might learn in the military. The shoes, the Windwalker shoes that he wore in September 1969, you could purchase at a military basis, and that's another indication that you're dealing with a military man. His haircut should even suggest that he's a military man. He knew how to operate weapons and so forth. Even Zodiac, which he called himself in August '69. He started a letter like this. This is the Zodiac speaking, and even Zodiac is related to the actual military. I was able to find that in the 1950s, Zodiac watches of the type Hermetic or Leatherneck Award were issued in the U.S. Marine Corps to top performers in their officer candidate school. So maybe this Zodiac was a military man, and he had actually received the watch, and that served as an inspiration for him to use the name Zodiac. Also, during the Vietnam War, the Zodiac watches, which brand was very popular. There was the Rolex Submariner and the Zodiac Sea. Both of these were very popular in the military around that time, again indicating he might have been a military man. Also, Zodiac disappeared for quite some time and reappeared in 1974. He may have been stationed in Vietnam or elsewhere during this time. So, again, I think the military connection is quite strong, and probably a military man. He showed knowledge of electronics. In several of his letters, he outlined bomb diagrams. So he knew bomb making. Again, electronics. He loved movies. He made many allusions to movies, particularly violent ones, such as The Most Dangerous Game, Museum Piece, which is less known as an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, giving a lot of inspiration from this. And many other movies as well. They loved movies. His letters were full of misspellings and grammatical idiosyncrasies. Whether he was actually dyslexic, suffering from some kind of learning disability, that's a hotly debated area. I have an analysis in my book, going through his letters and looking at his misspellings and so forth, but I wasn't really able to come up with a definitive conclusion because the evidence points in quite a few different directions. So he may have been dyslexic. He probably had access to two, maybe even three different cars. So we have there's a good probability we know which car he drove in December 1968 during the first Zodiac crime. And the next crime on July 4th, 1969, that was a different car. And in September 1969, we know the in-between track width of the car he drove that day, and that doesn't match the other two cars that I just referred to. So he probably had access to at least two cars. So he probably had a secure income, and his crimes were committed on the weekend, indicating he was busy doing Monday to Friday working. So he probably had a secure income, and so in that sense, he's also that doesn't fit the typical serial killer profile. Many experts argue that serial killers are losers; they can't keep a job for much longer and so forth. But it's clearly indicated that the Zodiac had a secure income. What else do we know about the Zodiac? Well, if you would want to find him, you might find trophies he took from Paul Stein's cat, October 1969. He took a large piece of his shirt, he cut that off, and used pieces of that shirt to prove his responsibility. But one piece he actually kept for himself. He also took his car keys, and I think he took his wallet as well. So someday it might just happen that somebody finds these items, and then you will have the Zodiac.
Do you think there are still some hidden clues around San Francisco, almost like Easter eggs that have never been found, that have been left by the Zodiac Killer?
Yes, definitely. He put in a lot of clues in his letters, and Ricardo Gomez, he discovered a clue not long ago in one of his letters, an indication in the Melvin Belli letters that was sent in December 1969. Melvin Belli was a very famous attorney. He defended Jack Ruby, who killed Lee Harvey Oswald. And Zodiac Killer wrote him a letter, and Ricardo was able to find a hidden clue in this letter. So there are probably more clues contained in his letters, and who knows, it might even have left some physical clues at few places over town, but by now they're probably gone. So yeah, more probability you'll find clues in his letters, wording. Yeah.
What do you think is out there? Is it more ciphers? Is it more maybe directions on where he's going? Does he have more clues from his victims that are still hidden in a box somewhere, buried inside a brick wall or something along those lines? I'm being hypothetical, but I'm just curious what you think could be out there.
Yes, well, in 1974, he sent a letter to the Chronicle in January 1974. And in this letter, he praised, he had a critique of The Exorcist, the movie, which was very hyped at this time as being the most horrific horror movie of all time. And he stated that it was the best satirical comedy that he had ever seen. He kind of mocked it, actually. And then in the end of the letter, he provided some kind of a drawing. We don't know what that is. And he said, if I don't see this note in your paper, I will do something nasty which you know I'm capable of doing. In other words, I'll start killing again if you don't print this in your paper. And we don't know what this drawing is. And I would encourage the listeners to take a look at it. It could be a hidden clue to his location, his name. All kinds of possibility has been proposed. He also sent the so-called Halloween card in, I think it was October 1970. And that might also contain some clues as well. He included some interesting symbolism and other things in that letter. And that might also contain some hidden clues of some sort.
Do you think the victims that survived are they in hiding right now? Are they trying to live normal everyday lives, or are they still looking over their shoulders, wondering if he's going to come back and finish the job?
One of his victims that survived, Ryan Hartnell, he's actually a very successful attorney and in California. I think he's a politician as well, actually. Very, very successful. So certainly he wasn't in hiding. Michael McGough, who was severely injured by the Zodiac in July 1969. It didn't turn out so well for him. he gave an interview in 2007 for the movie Zodiac. There was an extra DVD with interviews and so forth. And he didn't appear to have recovered very well, let me put it that way. So clearly, Zodiac had many victims, and the survivors continue to suffer to this day. That's why we must never forget the Zodiac case, and we must find him to get justice for his many victims.
Why do you think he stopped? Did he just get bored with the police? Did he get bored of wrecking the identity of a city? What stopped him?
Well, there are several theories about that as well. The first one is one that I already indicated, that he was very close to being caught. The other one is that he had already attained the publicity and attention that he wanted. He had already established himself as a cold-blooded murderer, and he only from that point on he didn't need to kill anybody else, but because now he would get the attention that he craved for. So that there's still theories as to why he stopped killing. Why did he disappear after 1974? We don't know. Maybe he found a wife. Maybe he had kids. Like the BTK killer, who was married, had kids, and was anything is possible. But again, we must seek justice and find the Zodiac, and it is possible to find him today, even though many years have passed. And quite often you'll actually hear of cases just as old as the Zodiac case, sometimes even older, that are actually solved via confessions, DNA evidence, and so forth. So it is possible.
I think he got bored. I really do, because if he really, really wanted to continue, he could have went to Los Angeles. He could have went, north to Portland or Seattle. There was plenty of options for him to do what he was doing without getting caught. And if he would have left the area, he would have easily, just been able to continue his spree. However, I think he either just got bored, or he went to prison on some other charge for a long time, or maybe he died or committed suicide. One of the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a possibility that he committed suicide. In one of his letters that he sent in November 1969, he complained of feeling lonely because he wasn't given enough attention, and he felt so lonely he could, quote, do his thing, in other words, kill. So we kind of associated loneliness and possibly depression and kind of alleviating these symptoms by killing. Clearly, we're speaking about a very destructive type of person here, and he might turn that frustration and anger towards himself at some point and actually kill himself. And also in his last letter, in one of his last letters, the Exorcist letter, he actually alluded to suicide. He quoted an Oprah, paraphrasing Oprah, a few sentences about suicide, again indicating that might be on his mind. Either he actually committed suicide shortly after this, or perhaps many years later. We don't know.
Why do you think there's been 600 plus people coming out to try and say that they are him?
Well, the case attracts a lot of people who love attention, unfortunately, who doesn't care much about the actual facts, but more about getting into the spotlight. And the media seems to be quite eager to publish the claims without actually looking at the evidence. In Robert Graysmith, for instance, they published 2 books about Arthur Lee Allen alleging that he actually committed, that he actually worked for Zodiac. However, Arthur Lee Allen's fingerprints didn't match, his handwriting didn't match, it didn't match the physical description of the witnesses that the witnesses gave. DNA didn't match, and so forth. So clearly he worked in the Zodiac, but he wrote 2 books about it. And the 2007 movie about the Zodiac was based on his books. So sometimes they actually attain quite a lot of success. But again, there's so much evidence in the Zodiac case. So if a good suspect emerges, then if there is any evidence to work with, handwriting, fingerprints, etc., then we'll know whether or not that person is the Zodiac, because there's so much evidence to work with and compare.
We only got about 5.5 minutes left with you tonight, Soren, on Spaced Out Radio, and I want to say thank you so much for being with us tonight. Do you think this is a case, and I'd like you to go into detail with this, that will ever be solved?
Well, we can only hope. I think there's a pretty good chance that it will be solved. Of course, pretty good is actually relatively low, but compared to other cases from that area, because there's evidence to work with, maybe in the future a full DNA profile of the Zodiac can be extracted from some of his letters and then run through the system. Who knows? And that might give a good result. But we'll probably end up like Jack the Ripper case. We'll be arguing, discussing the Zodiac case and the facts of the case and the psychodynamics for the next 100 years, probably. And I would, if the readers are interested in the case, I would suggest that they read my book or go to radianceandinches.com, which is a journal that I edit along with Ricardo Gomez, and we up to this point we primarily focus on the Zodiac case, but we are now including other unsolved crime cases as well, and criminal psychology. And the readers, if they find this subject fascinating, they might also be interested in reading this journal on my book.
Do you think this is something that is going to come down to the...
Or somebody finds the trophies that he took.
Do you think he probably has a stash of memorabilia that will end up being found in an attic somewhere? Do you think maybe that's what cracks the case?
I think there's a pretty good possibility that he kept all newspaper articles about himself. If he's still alive, he probably read all books about himself. He loved reading about himself, and he followed newspapers and read articles about himself, even corrected an article at one point. So if you will one day find him, you would find a huge stash of newspaper articles about himself, and possibly books.
My friend, I want to say thank you for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to learn a little bit more about the Zodiac Killer here in hour number 2. But in hour number 1, we talked about the brains and the science that goes behind what would turn someone so evil in regards to that. What's up next for you, Soren, as you continue this dialogue in researching serial killers?
Well, right now I'm going to focus on Radiance and Ninjas. I'm going to write a lot of articles about other unsolved cases. I also focus on criminal profiling, drawing a portrait of killers that haven't been caught yet. And I might also start interviewing serial killers again in the future, giving some more information. These are some in this area. These are some of the things that I'm working on. I'm working on quite a few things. I'm also working on another book unrelated to any of this, so that will also come out in the future. Quite a few things, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on Spaced Out Radio tonight. Thank you so much on behalf of our audience. Coming up in hour number 3, our resident scientist, Eric Markham, we call him the preacher around these parts, will be with us to break down more science of the serial killer. You are listening to Spaced Out Radio. I'm your host, Dave Scott. Hour number 3 coming up right after this, along with the Thought of the Dave.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
There's stories, then there's the truth. Do any of us really trust the news anymore? This is Jamie Sexton, owner of Rebel Planet News. The third Thursday of every month, I appear on SpacedOutRadio.com to bring you the truth you deserve, without mainstream media lies or alternative media fear-mongering. We'll get to the heart of the story and deliver the truth you're seeking. So come join us here for the Rebel Planet at SpacedOutRadio.com.
We are lighting the void on Saturday nights on Spaced Out Radio. Hey, this is Joe Roop, and I'm hanging out in SOR headquarters every Saturday night, bringing you the latest news when it comes to the weird and strange. Bigfoot, occult, UFOs, ghosts, and everything in between, I got you covered. You can tune in to SpacedOutRadio.com starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. Come travel into the void with us on Spaced Out Saturdays.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on SpacedOutRadio.com.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com.
Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with U4Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
There's a lot of strange going on in this world, and we can help you find out what's going on with you. Paranormal, cryptids, UFOs in the sky, aliens in your bedroom tickling your toes. We have the investigators you need to find out the answers you deserve. All you have to do is head to spacedoutradio.com. Your information is 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report. It's free, and we're here to help.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, former Skinwalker Ranch employee John B. Alexander, who worked hand-in-hand with Robert Bigelow, will be our guest tomorrow night starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on the Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Tachistoscope. 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 Tack-i-sto-scope. There, we broke it down. Sometimes these are really bad tongue twisters, but Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect live with me during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can join us for live chat in the SOR Space Travelers group as well. We're on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. You can pick up our archives there. We're on iHeartRadio in the United States. TalkStream Live. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download and subscribe to our shows on iTunes. Our website was spacedoutradio.com. where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. Shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Rock out to some Bumblefoot. Watch some great videos from UFO Seekers and Contact TV. We also have the Encounter Online, dealing with everything strange, paranormal as well. And our website for our crowdfunding is GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. That's GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. We are raising money to build a brand new studio here at SOR headquarters. We can use your help. We have terrestrial stations lining up to pick us up. We need your help. So go to GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night and donate or share the post today. Hour number 3 of Spaced Out Radio tonight, we're going to continue with a bunch of topics tonight, including serial killers, which we were talking about the first 2 hours with author Soren Korsgaard. I do apologize for the audio with him. It was a signal from Europe, and also around here, we are going through a major temperature change where it was above zero, above freezing, the last 3 days. Today, it has dropped to about minus 24 degrees Celsius right now, which is around minus 15 Fahrenheit. So I went outside to take my dog out, because my dog, I usually take him out during the break so he can go and do his business. And literally, everyone, trees are cracking everywhere because what was thawing is now frozen. So if the signal is cutting out, I can't do anything about it. I wholly apologize to you. You know, the phone call from Europe, I realize his audio wasn't that strong. It sounded a little muffled, but if the show was cutting out, unfortunately, due to the internet, I can't do much about the signal. So I do apologize to you. Hopefully this hour goes a little bit better. I'm going to blame Mother Nature outside. And right now we bring in the Preacher, Eric Markham, our resident Spaced Out Radio scientist. Preacher, how's it going?
Oh, doing great. Thanks for having me on.
My friend, before we get started, I got to tell you about a great paranormal experience I had today. A great paranormal experience. So, as many of you know who listen in, I run a paranormal tour at the local museum. And recently, a psychic medium named Sherry moved up here. And today I interviewed her about joining our tour and potentially our ghost team. And she had never been to the museum before. So her and I went down to the museum, and when you pull into the museum, into the parking lot, right facing forward to you is the main house. And then you got to walk probably 300 yards to where the Clydesdale barn is, where everybody knows where we got that awesome picture of the ghost back in September. So as we were walking back, she started asking about Carl. And she goes, you know, you have to start looking for footprints. And I said, what do you mean? I said, it's weird that you say that, because last week I literally started looking in the snow in my yard to see if there were any strange tracks that I might be able to see. Maybe Carl made them. I don't know. I wonder about this. So as we started walking back, it was cold, and you know, you're kind of bundled up inside yourself, and you're kind of looking out of the top of your eyes, you know, because usually when it's cold, you walk with your head kind of slanted downward. And in my vision, looking forward, I see a gentleman standing there in the snow, and then he takes a few steps, and like he's going towards one of the barns and the blacksmith shop that we have there, and he disappears right on the trail that is cut through the snow. And I said to Sherry, I said, you know, I just saw somebody standing over there. And she goes, where? I said, come on, I'll show you. It's on our way anyways. So when we got to the spot where this man that I saw was standing, lo and behold, there are imprints of footprints on the snow, and then 4 or 5 little footprints leading out. There was no prints leading in. There was only one track of them leading out. It was the strangest thing. I have posted pictures. If you go on Facebook and you go and you type in 108 Mile Ghost Tours. Real simple. Go on Facebook, 108 Mile Ghost Tours. You will see the photos there. And by the way, when you make a visit there, please do me a favor and give our Facebook page a like for the tour. I think you guys will be thoroughly impressed because literally when it's minus 18 out, there's no childlike footprints that are digging into the snow. You keep children at home because they get cold so fast. So it was an interesting day. You can see my footprints, which are the bigger ones, all right? And then you see these little ones leading up to where you see a patch. I wish I could have taken more photographs. However, at that point, it was minus 18 degrees Celsius. If you have an iPhone, you know that it's going to drain your lithium-ion battery within seconds if it's that cold. All right? So I literally had 3/4 of my battery life. I got 3 pictures in, and my phone died. So I had to only survive with the 3. And thank you, Preacher, for posting the link in the Spreaker chat room. So it's if you go to Facebook, once again, open up a new tab, go to 108 Mile Ghost Tours, give our page a like. I would really appreciate that. And you can see the photos of the footprints in the snow. It's actually really, really cool if you take a look at that. So thank you. But it was cool, man. It was way, way interesting.
It's always good when you get some physical evidence to go with what you've seen. It's always kind of self-affirming and validating at the same time.
It really is. It really is. And, it's something that I really, really, really enjoy. And, I see people going on over to the 108 Mile Ghost Tours page now. Thank you, Sandra and Debbie and Kiki, for liking the page for it. And, you can see the photos right there. And, it's something that that museum, man, it just keeps on giving. It's like a paranormal destination spot, because there is always something happening there. Always something happening, and you just never know what you're going to get. And to get footprints in the snow, man, I never thought we would get that.
Well, has anybody ever looked into activity in the summer versus activity in the winter? Because there's some research out there that suggests that colder weather actually brings activity levels up. There's something about the energy or something about the temperature that makes things work.
I want to say thanks to Jeff on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio for posting the pictures right there, and thank you, Deb, for the compliment there. But it is, Preacher, it gets so cold up here. It really does. And unfortunately, we cannot post the pictures in Facebook. In Spreaker. So if you're in the Spreaker chat room, just scroll down until you see Eric Markham's post that has the Facebook page. So it's facebook.com/108. So 108 Mile Ghost Tours. And if you could give the page a like, I would really appreciate that. We're trying to build up that page. Of course, if you come up to this fall's Caribou Paracon, you'll be able to take that tour of the facility. Because with the ticket package for September 28th to 30th, we're one of the items that we are doing with people is Mike Moran from Haunted Crew of Canada. You hear him here on Ghosts of the Great White North. He is actually going to be taking people on tours of the museum on the Saturday night. So part of your ticket package when you buy in for that weekend, and it's only $150, it equals out to about $118, $120 American. okay, will actually be a... we have 2 ghost tours going on, actually, but one will be at this museum. So I highly suggest you check it out. You come on in and, you be a part of it. It's going to be a lot of fun that weekend. And, if you and your spouse need a weekend getaway and you're down in Texas like Kevin and Kevin's Beard, okay, and you need to get away, this is the place to come. You will have a blast up here. You will have an absolute blast, September 28th to the 30th. And we'll show you all around the museum. Dress appropriately because it does start to get cold at night around that time of year. But we'll have tickets on sale soon at spacedoutradio.com. Now, Preacher, when it comes to serial killers, as we get back on track here, and the minds and the science behind it is, we tried to have that conversation with Soren tonight, and at times it was a little difficult to hear him, and I'll blame the connection between, the west coast of Canada and Denmark for that. Do you believe there is some sort of chemical imbalance in the brains of people who, I don't want to say snap, but, deep down in their heart, they're so cold and so rigid that they believe that killing is a natural thing?
Well, there's been actual, studies they've done, MRIs and CAT scans of, known, convicted psychopaths that are in prison right now. And one of these doctors, name was James Fallon, not to be confused with Jimmy Fallon, the night show host. He was going through a stack, a stack of films, and he was observing the structural map of these brains. And he got to the bottom one, and I can't remember why it was there, but he found, the last psychopath in the pile was his own brain scan. Okay, now here's a man who's never committed a murder, hasn't gone on a spree, any of that stuff. He is very dedicated to his work, but it brought up that whole nature versus nurture argument that, that's one of the first things in a psychology class, is nature over nurture. And here's this guy thinking he was one bedtime story or one hug from his mom away from being like these other psychopaths. So there is definitely a traceable physical cause. There is an organic, brain function that pushes people toward that.
Is it a certain part of the brain of where this type of evil matter is located?
That I'm not sure if they've ever, I think it's more of a spread out throughout the brain. It's a brain wiring dysfunction. We could actually, if there was enough interest in studying it, we could probably rewire people. I mean, that's one of the things electroconvulsive therapy, or what's known as electroshock therapy, it got a bad rap because it was misused and used as a form of punishment. It can actually be used correctly and treat everything from chronic depression to, impulse control. So I think as time goes on, I think you'll be able to actually, one, scan a brain, see if there's a predisposition toward psychopathy or violence, and, working with the patient, be able to do some kind of, whether it's electroshock or transmagnetic therapy. There's a thing where instead of shocking you, they use a magnetic probe on the outside of the skull, and they can actually do some neuron rewiring that way. There's a lot of stuff out there that's in the experimental stage, but since we're dealing with human testing, the red tape and the moral dilemma is the ethics behind it. It can get pretty labyrinthine to get a study going.
Do you think then, Eric, that these people are born this way, or do you think that something snaps in them to happen, to turn them this evil?
I think you've got both. Like the neurologist who discovered he had the same structures as the psychopaths that he was. These guys were horrible killers and, just awful people that were in prison, that he was studying. And he had the same brain, but there he's managed to go through medical school and, go through, a specialty. So we're talking to somebody that spent the better part of 20 years of his life focused on, a goal that had nothing to do with killing. So I think if you have the predisposition for that behavior, it's just a matter of how were you raised, what was the trigger, and there's also maybe a genetic component. There's a gene. We have X and Y chromosomes that determine sex. There's a genetic variant of the X chromosome that codes for a different enzyme. And that enzyme can trigger, when people snap, this gene makes them more liable to snap. It gives them a predisposition for this violent outbreak. And they might never have been violent before. It's just the right circumstances hit. And boom, this guy goes off. It's actually a deficiency, and it's called the warrior gene. And right now, because it was used in a somewhat high-profile case in Tennessee as a defense, it's very controversial because people don't want to hear, "Oh, my brain made me do it." In court and in the court of public opinion, people want to see murderer A did crime B, murdered person B. We want revenge. They don't want to hear that there might have been an organic cause. They look on it as a feeble excuse for bad conduct. And the more we look into this, the more we find that it may not be. It just might, it's not that somebody's inherently evil. It's just your brain chemistry makes you do things. For the most part, we people go through our everyday life and we don't have any, our brain doesn't make us do anything particularly aberrant. But there's outliers and there's exceptions to the rule. And as a society, we're not really willing to accept those outliers. It's very much we are a punishment-based society.
Do you believe then that with people who have this, that they're literally one matchstick away from blowing up, though? Or is this something that maybe everyone has this gene, but for some it's more prevalent in scientific scanning?
Well, I think we all have the X chromosome, it's a matter of how does its functionality, how does this gene code its protein that it's responsible for? And there's just, you look at all the population of the world, and if you apply just basic statistics to it, a basic Gaussian curve where you've got an average and then you've got the less probable thing going off in each direction. With the population we have, you're going to start seeing more of these extreme examples, just because it's a statistical inevitability. You've got a bigger data pool, so you're going to have more numbers of people, and it's just a matter of the right combination happening.
Let's look at the police side of things here for a second. The police have as many clues as they could possibly find right now. Some are still untapped resources that the best ciphers can't figure out. They can't break the code. What do you think the chances of this case ever being solved are?
I think the only way that case is ever going to be solved is, one, if the man is still, or woman, whoever the Zodiac Killer is, if they took their trophies or took their confession, they will have been able to put stuff in their confession or in the trophy case that's going to prove that they were who they said they were. I have a feeling that maybe there's a safe deposit box somewhere that has a full confession, some kind of evidence to prove irrevocably that the person that owns that box is the Zodiac Killer. And someday when they die, there's going to be an attorney that I don't think we'll ever solve it. I think it's going to be a matter of they have a contingency plan. Once they're dead, the evidence will be revealed. I think, or they're demolishing an old house somewhere, like you said during the show, and they find this box of stuff in a brick wall. I don't think they'll ever figure it out as far as how cryptography or anything like that.
Now, let me ask you this, because this case is still open. It may be a cold case, but it is still wide open by the FBI. Yet recently, earlier this year, they shut down the D.B. Cooper case. And they said, you know what, we'll take evidence if it comes in, but no, we're not really looking for evidence anymore in the case of D.B. Cooper. Do you see that happening eventually with the Zodiac Killer case? Because we're almost 40 years plus out. All right, 42, 43 years plus out, if not more. Today, I mean, if this guy was, say, in his, 30s or 40s when he was committing these crimes, that would now put him in his 80s, maybe as old as 90, depending on his age. Not a lot of men live to be 90 years old, especially if they had a former mother-in-law and ex-wife like I did.
Well, keeping in mind that what D.B. Cooper did was, he didn't kill anybody. And there's actually a statute of limitations, or there's a point where there's more money that's been invested in trying to figure out who he was than the crime was worth. In the case of a serial killer where you're talking about lives taken, I don't think it's going to be looked at the same way. I think that's going to stay an open case as long as there's anybody even remotely interested because of the heinous nature of the crimes. It's people were killed horribly. There's no statute of limitations on that kind of thing.
What do you think the police need in order to solve this? What do you think, after researching this, is the missing link?
I think the guy covered his tracks enough, and just with what I've looked at on some of I'm no cryptology expert. I just wanted to look at what they had to look at. I think the Zodiac Killer put non sequitur symbols in there just to throw off the pattern. When you're trying to make this piece of the puzzle fit, but it's from another puzzle, that's going to throw things off. I would say it would take going back over the victims and maybe finding some DNA evidence that was overlooked. Because, face it, there's a lot of stuff that's happened since these crimes were committed, and DNA evidence is much more easy to use and to get results from. But I'm sure they've already thought of that. Did this guy foresee? Is he brilliant enough that he foresaw that there would be a time that trace evidence like a skin cell can convict somebody? Obviously, the guy was of above average intelligence, so who knows? I don't think personally, I don't think, unless they just get some inconceivably, smoking gun piece of evidence dropped in their laps, I don't think they'll ever figure it out.
I'm wondering, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, because I can tell you I don't. I'm wondering if they have ever exhumed any of the bodies to retest any potential DNA that may be left in the broken down coffins.
Well, that's a problem in that DNA, if genetic material is not taken at the time, when it's fairly fresh, it degrades over time. So if they did exhume a body with decomposition of the body itself, decomposition of any DNA evidence that was left behind, I would say it's nil and zero of getting anything meaningful. What they might find, like some kind of trace evidence, but even that, if a body has been properly embalmed, okay, it's been one of the first things you do is you hose the body down. You basically wash all the foreign debris. It's like giving the body a shower. You shampoo the hair. So the body is essentially bathed before it's embalmed. You get everything set up, then you start doing the embalming procedure. So chances of an eyelash or some itty bitty piece of trace evidence being left on a corpse the cadaver is, at this point, it would be astronomical. Not impossible, but extremely improbable.
So how do they go about it then? Is it all circumstantial evidence now? Or, like we said earlier during the show, does it have to be somebody going into the attic of a house and all of a sudden finding the collection box that most murderers have?
I would say that's probably what's going to be. I mean, they have gone over every bit of physical evidence they have with all the modern, they have tried to, they've swabbed them, they've looked for everything they can, unless they were so focused that they missed something obvious, which can happen. You can be investigating something and just miss something obvious because you're lost in the minutiae. That's about the only thing I can see happening. Or, like you said, they find his trophy box. And that, but as far as any of the other evidence that they have right now, I'm sure they've put it through the ringer. If they haven't, that doesn't make sense in its own right.
Do you think the Zodiac Killer is still alive?
Possibly. Like I say, I foresee somebody that, this person, yes, he's a psychopath, but he's also a narcissist. You can be a narcissist without being a psychopath, but most psychopaths, because of their feeling of superiority, they have a narcissistic streak. I can see, a contingency plan set up that when they are dead, because this person does not want to go to prison for what they've done, but when they're dead, a box is going to show up at a police station. And, here's the thing. It might have happened already. He might have died some years ago, and the box showed up, and busy day, nobody wanted to deal with it, and they tossed it in evidence. We'll look at this later. It may.
Maybe it's sitting at a lawyer's office, waiting for him to die.
Well,
I mean, there's all sorts of things that can happen.
Sort of like what I was saying earlier. Maybe it's in a safe deposit box, and upon the client's death, the lawyer will go and has instructions that upon Mr. whatever his name's, death, deliver this. It's probably already pre-boxed, pre-postage or everything. So I think the possibility that the killer is alive is still probably pretty good. They could have been like an idiot savant in that they were advanced beyond their years. It could have been a young person, like in their 20s, that was just that cunning and had a particular genius for being a serial killer. And that's why, they haven't died yet. They were young enough when they were doing it that just isn't, it's not their time yet.
I think he's alive. I don't know why I think that. I think he's alive. I think he is a grandiose type, egotistical, maniacal person who absolutely sits back in his lounger at about 78 years old, smiling, with the fact that 40 years later, there's shows like this one still trying to decipher who it is and what it is all about. I think he takes the secret to the grave, but I also believe, and I'm curious to get your opinion on this, whether or not, that time he disappeared, between notes, it was almost 16, 18 years before he resurfaced in 1990 and then went absolutely silent again with his notes. I'm wondering if during that first portion that maybe he was in prison for something else. It might have been assault and battery. It may have been, extortion or whatever it could be. Bank robbery. Could have been anything. You know what I'm saying? Because in 16 years, your appearance can change quite quickly.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're incarcerated. That's a very good thought. Or they found their way. One of the statistics that you can look up, it's 4% of high-power executives and CEOs and companies are psychopaths. Their brain chemistry is wired that they are they are psychopaths. They're high functioning, and they, instead of going out and killing people, they run companies ruthlessly. So maybe for 16 years, this person was engaged in some kind of business, or maybe they did a stint in the military. It's, that something might have taken them out of circulation, as it were. Or, if this person, if it thought that it was getting hot here in the States, joined the military, stationed overseas. I don't know if anybody's ever looked for a similar MO taking place where, in Germany or Korea, someplace where we station soldiers. You might have been overseas for 16 years. You never know.
Well, and if the profile states, like Soren had said in the first 2 hours, that they do believe he had some sort of militaristic background, could very well be. He may have, went to serve in bases in Okinawa or South Korea or Germany. He could have been anywhere for that 16 years' time.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, that maybe he was just out of circulation here. I don't know if anybody has ever, if they've ever gotten together with Interpol, or is this person smart enough, they are in a fresh hunting ground, to change their, the way they do things. If this person is really addicted to killing people, that's what they, this is what, makes or breaks their day. They might have been smart enough to alter the way they did it so there'd be no connection. So Interpol wouldn't say, "Wow, these murderers sure do look a lot like that Zodiac guy." He still gets to do what he wants, but there's no tie back. I think, I'm with you. I think he's still alive, or they are still alive. One of the theories is it was not a lone wolf, but somebody working with somebody. It might have been a hunting pair. So
we had that in my hometown about 20 years ago. We had a person who they called the Abbotsford Killer. His name was Terry Driver. And what he did was he killed one girl and beat another girl within an inch of her life. And he was eventually caught, but he taunted police on the phone with cryptid type messages and with phone calls as well to 911 and to the radio station. And this was a man who suffered from Tourette's. Okay, he was married with 2 children. He was very much an introvert, and it's funny because he was a very out of shape man. And one of the clues that this psychopath did was he took a granite headstone from the girl that he murdered grave. Her name was Tanya Smith. And he took it from the graveyard and he placed it on the hood of the local radio station's vehicle. Because, radio stations, they all have their vehicles all deckled up. Well, he put it on the hood. Now, a granite gravestone is between 150 and 300 pounds. They're heavy. Okay, an out of shape guy like him, there's no way he could have put that on that vehicle, because here's the big thing about that. There wasn't a scratch on the hood. Now, if I'm lifting, and I consider myself to be a pretty strong guy, but 150 pounds is 150 pounds of dead weight. If I am carrying dead weight like that, and I have to lean over the hood to put that on the hood of a car, there's going to be some scratching because you're going to kind of toss it. You don't want to get your fingers pinned under it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And the funny part about that was that case, the composite drawing that came out by a police sketch artist looked like Terry Driver's brother. So when they went to court, Terry Driver's 2 brothers shaved their heads out of protest to support their brother, because the one brother looked identical with his hairline, because, you could tell someone's hairline after they shaved their head. If you looked at his hairline, it would have been exactly the same looking as the composite drawing by police. It was amazing.
I could see that. There's no limit to what, a lot of times there's no limit to what brothers will do for each other. And even if the other brother didn't know Terry had killed somebody, just hey, get drunk. Hey, I got an idea. Why don't we snatch a headstone? And, I can see how a couple of drunk Canadian rednecks could come up with that idea.
But it terrorized our town. It totally terrorized our town. And, like the one survivor, she has moved on. She has moved forward. She's an advocate for violence and women's rights now, which is good for her. But it screwed her up. She was 16 years old when this happened. So, not much you can do. But it just shows how it doesn't matter if it's one murder or multiple murders. It could really affect a community and a community's defense mechanisms, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yes. It tends to draw a community together, because now you have that, that enemy that you can focus on instead of just that random, people have a tendency to have sort of a random wariness that we can turn against each other. So if you give them a unified target, it will bring it'll bring the community together.
But getting back to San Francisco, do you think that's a city that has ever healed from this nightmare?
I think a city that big with such a fluid population, it's probably, I think you'd probably go through that town right now like a live man on the street type thing and probably not get too many people that knew what you were talking about unless they saw, the TV show or something. I don't think, possibly when it was happening, yes, but now I doubt it.
I agree with you on that part. I don't think the younger generation cares. The mid 30s and younger, I don't think they really care, because unless they were related to somebody, it really didn't affect them. It's not like, Vancouver was when Robert Pickton was going through his murderous spree, where people were wondering, there was a big debate in Vancouver at that time where people were rude and crass about it. Like, who cares? It's just a bunch of drug-addicted hookers. But then you had people saying, no, they're human beings as well. The arrogance in that argument was, dividing up a city, especially, when the Olympics were coming as well during that time. So there was a big issue around that whole scenario. But you look at it today, the attitude is, well, he's in jail, they nailed him, we could go back to living normal again and, keep our noses in the sand or in the sky while looking down at our cell phones.
Well, yeah, and it's also perception of the victim. If the victim is thought of as some virtuous, church-going pillar of the community, people are going to get more upset. If like you said, if the perception is the victims were drug-addicted whores, well, there's going to be that, and I'm not advocating this, I'm just going to say there's the people trying to buffer the horror are going to grab anything they can to make it less painful to them. So you've got the group that says, well, we'll lessen our personal pain or our personal anxiety by blaming it on the victim. And that's, that happens in the States. That's a worldwide phenomenon. There's the idea of the justified victim, part of the psychology of an event like that.
I can totally see that. And the way we are so fast to forget things now, the way society is, moving so speedily throughout the day and night, is anybody talking disclosure anymore? Is anybody talking about, the Atlanta Olympic bombings? Who talks about it besides the people who bring it up on nightly talk shows like this one?
Well, yeah, the news cycle has got our attention span for the most part. If there's nothing new about a topic within 24 hours, we're on to the next, fake news or the next sensationalistic headline. There's no attention span anymore.
You going to stick around for the thought of the Dave?
Why, certainly.
Well, I appreciate that, Preacher. Thanks very much. Let's fire up the music. Oh, little Bumblefoot, Cuterebra. Gotta love it. Let's crank this up a bit. The Thought of the Dave is a topic I do on my personal Facebook page every single day, where I ask a question, and then I ask you, our following audience, to go on over there and tell me what you think of the thought of the day. What is your opinion? Because I'm going to read it on the show during this time every single night. Tonight's Thought of the Dave is about the Zodiac Killer. Do you believe the man behind the Zodiac will ever be caught? Is he dead? Is he alive? Is he the perfect murderer? These are some of the responses that we got today on the Thought of the Dave on my Facebook page. So all you do is bring up Dave Scott, and you'll find my profile picture, wearing a rock and roll headband from Guns N' Roses, and my guitar in the background. That's my photo. Elizabeth started off strong. She goes, brief look at it off the top of my head. He will not be caught. He went on to become a trusted government official like a chief of police or police captain, and that was his satisfaction over the whole thing, making fools of everyone. I don't know if he would have done that unless he was already a police officer, or maybe a military police officer to make the transition. Because if he, at that time, was in his 40s, late 30s, early to mid-40s, it's getting a little old to be a cop and then to make your way up into a police chief or a police captain. So I'm not too sure if he went on to become, somebody heavy involved in the police force. What do you think, Preacher?
Well, that we have so little to base anything on that could very well be. I mean, they've done a study that show that some of the people that become cops are, slightly psychopathic in their own right. So, it's possible. I think by now they're, like you said, they're retirement age, so I doubt if they're active. They're active now, but then, let's look at the BTK killer. The man was, an elder in his church, a Boy Scout leader. I mean, he had 2 lives, so it's entirely possible that this Zodiac killer had 2 persona, one that you would not, above reproach, and then the other, the evil, twisted, genius serial killer.
I think that, like I said earlier, I think that he, may have been in prison for 16 years, or maybe he was in the military and got stationed overseas somewhere, or maybe changed coastlines in order to, do the rest of his duty as, say, part of the Army or most likely the Navy or something along those lines. That's the way I'm leading with it. I really am. And I think that's a little bit more justified on that, because to disappear, for 16 years, go back to San Francisco, drop a letter off to the newspaper in 1990, and then disappear and hasn't been heard from since. I think that first 16 years or so, he was in the military, or he died, or he was in prison. I don't believe he was a cop whatsoever, although it would be the ultimate disguise.
Yeah. That's something, for the most part, serial killers don't stop. I mean, they're just not wired that way. Once they get hooked on it, it's like an addiction. So for the person to have stopped for 16 years, that does suggest that there was some outside force beyond their control acting on them. Unless this person is just, one heck of a exception to all the rules about serial killers that we've compiled so far. And that is a fairly new science. I mean, I don't think we've got, 50 years of data collected altogether on, that kind of, profiling and that kind of, we've come a long way, but I think there's still a lot more to discover.
All right, Tessa comes on and says, I believe they are getting closer to finding out who did this. They even believe they have broken his secret code. I am hopeful that these cold cases will be closed. And, I know they continue to work on it. As we know, the FBI is still considering this an open case. They haven't even really moved it over to the cold case file yet, even though there isn't really anything new, but they keep it open. I believe he is still on the top, he's on one of the top lists for manhunts. So I just don't believe. I believe what Eric said, that they're going to find one day a box is going to show up out of some lawyer's office, after this person is dead, and say, here's the evidence, this is who did it, and we move on from there. What do you think, Eric?
Oh, that's my feeling. If we're going to resolve it, like I said, unless it's a 1 in a billion chance that some piece of evidence was overlooked, that the active investigation stumbles on, it's going to be something like the mysterious box showing up is going to be the only way that's ever solved.
Mm-hmm. Robin brings up a good point. Oh, go on.
Well, maybe this person finds out they have a lethal, or not the word I'm looking for, they have an incurable disease and their time is limited.
Yes.
And they might want to go out on that, hey, I was the Zodiac Killer, before they expire.
Let's get to a couple more here because time is winding down in the thought of the day. Robin says, I live near the Green River, and the Green River Killer was caught 30 years later. Now on to the Zodiac Killer. It depends how old he was when he started killing and if he had or has health problems. Back in the 60s, they didn't have as good of health care like we do now. He could still be alive, died of old age or stroke, for example, or of natural causes. You're absolutely right, Robin. Very good assessment in looking at both stories. I love Joe Allgaier's report here. I really do. I really do, as we start to wind things down. This is going to be our last one of the day. He says, ready to blow your mind? There's no more Zodiac killings after D.B. Cooper hijacked an airplane. Why? It's the same guy. And the pictures of the Zodiac Killer, the composite drawings of the Zodiac Killer, and D.B. Cooper look very, very similar. Great work, Joe. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. Everyone, thank you so much, Preacher, for being on with us. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother Is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. We appreciate Mr. B and his guitar god stature around here. I want to say thank you to Soren Korsgaard as well for being on the show for the first 2 hours. The Preacher Eric Markham in hour number 3 as we talk the Zodiac Killer. Tomorrow night it's about the Skinwalker Ranch. It's about disclosure. Robert Bigelow's former employee, John Alexander, is going to be on this show. He's coming on the second 2 hours. The second 2 hours. So I'm planning something for hour number 1. I just can't let it go yet because it isn't confirmed. But we get going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. I want to remind you, we have a GoFundMe account going on right now. GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. That's GoFundMe.com/We Own the Night. We need some help to build a brand new studio. If you can donate, great. We'd love it if you did. It's just as important if you share the post to help other listeners get to it so maybe they have the opportunity to share it as well. I want to say thank you to everyone listening at home, everyone listening at work, in their cars, to everybody on Twitter for an absolute great night at #SpacedOutRadio. The veterans in the SOR Space Travelers Club, you know who you are, and everybody in Spreaker for taking part. You guys make it so much fun each and every night, because together, my friends, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. I need you to take us home. I'll talk to you in 21 hours from now. See you later, peeps. Talk to you tomorrow. Good night.